officially live, and that was perfect timing. It's right at noon. So we'll go ahead and get started here. Um, so my name is Taylor Slocum. I am one of the career counselors here at Columbus State Community College. We are kicking off our first day of the Healthcare Sneak Peek Week. So we have partnered with Ohio Health to bring different healthcare professionals throughout the week to talk about all their skills, their professions, to help you as students learn a little bit more about how to break into these different career fields and learn more about what they do and who they are as well. So huge thank you to the Ohio Health Learning Team, to Christina Davis and Stephanie Burgess. Christina is the lead simulationist with Grant, and Stephanie is also a simulationist with the Grant Learning Team. They have been instrumental with getting some amazing professionals to come this whole week and talk through all of their different skills and give advice and all of those different pieces. And next, I want to go ahead and let me back up really quick. So also you'll be seeing throughout the week Chelsea Francis and myself. Chelsea Francis is another career counselor. Today she is monitoring the chat. I'm doing the Q&A. She is monitoring that chat, so feel free to submit any questions, thoughts, anything that you have that you'd want to share with our special guest today. And that leads me into our introduction of Dr. Zachary Smith. He is a medical resident with Ohio Health. Thank you again so much for being here today.
All right. It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So today we're going to spend the first 30 minutes doing a quick Q&A. And again, students, feel free to submit any or all of your questions to the chat. Chelsea will be relaying those our way. But we'll go ahead and kick things off with our first question. But first question for you, Dr. Smith, is what is your current role? And also, please provide an overview of your career journey and how you got to where you are now.
All right. Absolutely. I'll attack that question kind of in chronological order. I'll do the journey and then kind of talk about my current role. Again, I'm going to be very kind of brief about the various parts of my journey, but I'm not hiding anything. Happy to go into any amount of detail that you want. So if there's any questions about a particular part, anybody just feel free to ask. No secrets. I'm an open book. Just let me know. First of all, I grew up in rural Oklahoma. I didn't have a whole lot of mentorship when starting the college education process. My family wasn't big on education, so they had this kind of very hands-off attitude to my upbringing. So I've always kind of had this go at it alone kind of attitude, for better or worse. And I also started in a junior college, a 2-year college in like northeast Oklahoma. And then, I started there, then transferred to the University of Central Oklahoma, completed my 4 years there, where I did most of the required curriculum for medical school, graduated with a degree in biomedical engineering. I then worked a few years in the field at a hospital. At that time, I got a master's degree as well in health administration and policy from the University of Oklahoma. Then I worked in that field in healthcare administration for a while. And then when I was working in the field there, I kind of studied for the MCAT at night. Also took an MCAT course. Applied to about 20 different medical schools and was fortunate to get into a few, and went to medical school at Georgetown and in Washington, D.C., and then started residency here at Ohio Health in Grant in family medicine. And in my role as a resident in family medicine, the journey for like anybody that's going in to become a physician, it's very similar up until like residency. And once you get into residency, everybody's experience will be a little bit different. As a family medicine physician and resident, I practice primary care in my clinic where people come to see me for their various healthcare needs. And my goal is just trying to keep people healthy. I also spend a significant amount of time rounding in the hospital, taking care of patients that are hospitalized, and also spend a significant amount of time taking care of pregnant patients and delivering babies. And that's kind of in a nutshell what we do. And right now, I'm going to graduate or finish residency in about 8 months. So I'm starting to transition my role into becoming a attending physician, meaning I can practice independently without any supervision. And I'm kind of transitioning from the classic C1, B1, teach one. I'm starting to be kind of fill in that more of a role as a teacher at this point and teaching the newest batch of residents medicine and how to be a family medicine resident.
Thank you for sharing that, and congratulations on your upcoming graduation from everything shifting into attending resident. That's super exciting, and it's really neat to hear somebody's career journey where you started kind of in kind of a community college, junior college setting, and now you're all the way here to where where you always wanted to go to. So a lot of hard work probably went into that, and it's amazing that you are where you are now. And kind of my next question kind of continues on with that career journey, but is there anything that you would have done differently with your career journey?
Yeah. So the first thing, as I mentioned early in that last diatribe, is that I kind of like had this go at it alone attitude, and I think that resulted in me like missing some opportunities, kind of maybe wasting a little bit of time, because I was trying to scramble and figure things out myself. The thing I would have done differently is I would have like sought mentorship. I would have found somebody to help guide me through the process. Um, the application process for medical school, you can be a little bit daunting, no doubt. But once you kind of dive into it and figure it out, it is very doable. But really, it's just helpful to have somebody kind of show you how. And I was fortunate to find that person eventually, especially as I was preparing and like taking studying for the MCAT in earnest. So mentorship invaluable for that. Um, and then the other, yeah, I think that's probably the biggest thing is just seek out mentorship and don't go at it alone.
Absolutely. That's such a good tip too. And I think finding a mentor can be so incredibly helpful. Through career services, we do have a career mentorship program that if students are interested in kind of the healthcare field, we work to kind of pair you. And then if you're transferring on, other colleges also have really great formal programs. But like Dr. Smith said, you could potentially kind of seek that out and look for that in faculty and people in the field, different things like that
Mhm.
too, which is so helpful. I think that's mentorship and career services were like, oh yeah, that's a big one. So that's a good piece of advice.
I encourage people to take advantage of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And we did have a couple of quick questions come through that I think fit with kind of this piece, but would you be able to give a brief explanation of what a resident is, like how it's different from, like a attending physician and things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So you, after med school, you become a resident. The first year of residency is also called your internship. So you might hear of like somebody being an intern, and that's really a first year resident, as opposed to like an internal medicine. Um, but don't get that confused. If somebody says they're an intern, they're a first year resident. And really, what a resident is there's somebody who's still learning to become an independent provider. Everything that a resident does is supervised by a licensed practitioner, somebody who's graduated residency and has a full-fledged solo license. As a resident, I am required to be supervised in everything I do, whether I'm delivering a baby, whether I'm giving vaccines in my outpatient clinic, when I'm rounding on patients in the hospital. There's going to be an attending position, somebody who's graduated residency, supervising and co-signing everything I do. And at the end of at the conclusion of residency, the entire goal is that you pass your board exams for whatever specialty you're in, and your program director in your residency signs a paper saying, we have watched this individual go through residency, we've supervised everything they've done, and I am certifying that they are ready for solo practice, to go out and practice medicine without any supervision. And that's the job of the residency and all the faculty therein, to make sure that you are ready for independent practice. And if so, they sign a piece of paper allowing you to go forth and do that.
Perfect. Thank you. It's really, really helpful. And then one other question that did come through is, what did you do for volunteering and research hours? Were those a requirement for your medical school admissions, or did you kind of just seek those opportunities out? Just a little bit more about that a little bit.
Yeah, that's a great question. This kind of goes into some of the practical advice that I would have for people kind of early in the journey into applying to medical school. So I'll dive into that a little bit. Like, this will go into kind of like resume building and kind of preparation for applying to medical school. First of all, and I will answer your question here in a minute, but first of all, grades matter. When you fill out your uniform application for medical school, now it's been several years since I've done this, but I remember it pretty vividly, is that grades matter, and you have to fill out every class you've ever taken at each school you've ever gone to and put in like a letter grade for what grade you got. And so grades matter, that's no secret. The MCAT also matters. So your grades, your GPA, MCAT, and I'll talk more about the MCAT in a little bit. And then when you prepare your application for medical school, there is a personal statement, which I think is about 5,100 characters you're allotted for that. And that's super important. Your MCAT and your GPA will get your foot in the door, and your personal statement is an opportunity to like really like get you an interview spot, if you kind of wow them with your personal statement. And then there's a whole separate section of your application that has about 15 spaces, I believe, slots for extracurriculars. So this is your opportunity to talk about work experience. This is your opportunity to talk about volunteer, research, anything, hobbies, anything of that nature. And what I'll say about research, work experience, volunteer opportunities is that I think the quality of the experience is more important than the quantity of experiences you have. So, and I'll give you it's a kind of a brief example, is that like if you went out and you volunteered once at an organization and you just kind of went there, just spent your time and left after doing a half day of volunteering, that's not going to mean a lot to the committee that's going to be reviewing your application at the medical school. However, if you volunteered at the same organization every day, or not every day, but on like every week, and you did some kind of like meaningful role, like you implemented a project, you did something meaningful for the organization, that's going to carry a lot more weight. That might just be one item on your application, but it's going to be a lot more meaningful. So in kind of thinking about, like, I wouldn't encourage anybody just to go out and just do a lot of different volunteering just to put it on their resume. I would only invest in volunteer opportunities that you can take a meaningful role in. Likewise, if you are in school and you're a part of a committee or a club or something like that, try to take a meaningful role in that because in those different extracurriculars, you have about, I don't know, I think it's like 150 or 300 characters. So it's not a lot to kind of elaborate on what that experience was. And, the more you can kind of speak to actions that you took, and kind of always trying to bring it back into how it'll make you a better person, a better physician, prepare you for medicine. Um, that's kind of the long and the short of like volunteer opportunities. And to answer the research question, research was, it's some things that they like seeing, but by no means is it required. If the research isn't your thing, that's okay. It's usually not necessary. Some schools, it might be kind of like an unstated requirement. Like if you like were dead set on going to medical school at like the Mayo Clinic, maybe they would want you to have research under your belt. But for a majority of medical schools, I don't think it is necessary. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really helpful, especially with, finding meaningful experiences, finding these different things that appeal to you. And with the research that you did during your undergrad, what kind of stood out to you? Like, what did you get involved in, and what stood out to you that kind of pulled you into that research?
Well, I did a physics research. It wasn't even like a medical or biomedical kind of research opportunity. And I'll tell you what, it wasn't. Looking back, it wasn't something that was super like meaningful to me. I did take an active role in it, but I don't think it was anything that really like gave me a leg up. I think that other things like my work experience was much more meaningful. For me personally, I think that I also was able to put on a master's degree for what it was worth on my resume. So I had like a different experiences that I could put on there. But as like any student, I think that being able to put research on there is a good thing, but you shouldn't feel like bad or feel like you're behind if you don't have research on your resume.
Perfect. That's really helpful. And I know we kind of touched on the like resume building opportunities and things like that. And I'm trying to pull in a question here too. That's kind of so some of our students are just starting out. They're brand new to the medical field. They're trying to get their foot in the door. We have some questions about like what advice do you have for like finding shadowing opportunities, and then you know like what are ways like shadowing opportunities, what are other ways that students can start to build their resume now, like kind of in their first semester of going through everything, like what insights do you have in that regard?
All right. For like the shadowing question, that's a really good one. That one can be kind of challenging. I encourage you to be it's very proactive, especially in this that you kind of like how early you are in the process. One thing I do want to make clear before I forget or lose the opportunity is that as far as becoming a physician, one, I want you to just kind of like know yourself. I think that's very important. That's some key advice. Like know yourself and your motivations for going into medicine. And if you make the decision, to pursue it, just realize you're going to be spending the next like decade, pursuing that and completing the training. Okay, so it's a big decision to make, but if you make it, fantastic. We need great people in medicine, and we would love to have you. The I lost my train of thought there. I'm sorry, but anyway, if you make the commitment and you like know yourself, I'm just trying to think about and seeking mentorship. I think one way to do that is to no, I know what I was going to say. Sorry, is that the most difficult part of becoming a physician, like the biggest hurdle to overcome, is actually getting into medical school. Okay, that's one thing I want everybody to kind of hear and know. It's a very kind of daunting process, and it's for me it was the biggest hurdle, because once you get into medical school, you're kind of in a program, and it's in the medical school's best interest to get you through. And when you're kind of paying the tuition that you'll be paying in medical school, you want to get through. Um, but like no one, you get a lot of support. In my experience in medical school, you get a lot of support to get through medical school. And in residency, you continue to get a lot of support. So, but getting that approval letter, it's like, hey, you've been accepted to medical school, is the hardest part. To answer the shadowing opportunity question, um, I reaching out to like healthcare organizations, just kind of. I think that here at Ohio Health, we have a lot of people come through our residency clinic. We have first year medical students, we have fourth year medical students, we have people just shadowing. I don't think don't feel like you're you know on the outside looking in if you don't have like a family or friend or anybody that that's not a physician. But just kind of just like reach out, reach out to organizations, talk to like, your primary care doctor, see if they have a colleague that might be willing, but be bold and be proactive. That's what I would encourage you to do. And I'll say what shadowing is an important thing to put on your resume, like or your application to medical school, is just to kind of, it just shows that you're interested. And I would kind of encourage at least one shadowing opportunity.
Absolutely. That's really helpful. So just kind of sounds like being proactive, talking to people already within your network, your own physician, looking into potential like residency programs, potentially with Ohio Health or OSU
Yeah,
Medical Center, like things, Nationwide Children's, anywhere that's kind of around here. There's probably just kind of put your foot out and see. I know Nationwide, I don't know with COVID, but I know with the shadowing opportunities, there's just a form you fill out.
yeah,
Um, and just kind of checking that out, so definitely that's super helpful um advice as well. So kind of shifting into your role a little bit more, just kind of, would you be able to describe your job duties and what your favorite parts of the job are?
yeah. For me, like my duties is mostly patient care. I mean, that's what we're judged on most frequently, and that's the big portion of getting us ready for independent practice. So the goal is just see as many patients as possible. Now, as a family medicine physician, I see a lot of patients in different environments. So, some of them are outpatient, where they come to an office and they leave the office after a 20-minute appointment. I see them in the hospital, like when they're admitted to the hospital, and I see them, in the obstetrics unit when we deliver babies. So really, just seeing patients in all those different environments. Those are all a little different, but also very similar in a lot of ways. That's probably my biggest role. We also do like process improvement projects. We do a lot of paperwork, a lot of documentation. The best part, no matter how bad of a day I may or may not have, because the bad days come just like any other profession. The really the best part is and this might be a little cliche, but is interacting with the patients. Being like sometimes like my biggest frustrating part of like my day typically has to do with computers, like fighting the electronic medical record to have it do what I want or what I intend, um, and all the documentation that's required in medicine. You spend a lot of time doing documentation and paperwork. But no matter how frustrating the computer is or how much paperwork I have to do, when I actually find myself in the room with the patient, um, it's generally like a very good experience, and that's exactly like kind of where I wanted to be.
And actually, a really good question kind of came in that fits with that. But one of the students is wondering, what kind of training do you actually get on how to talk to patients, communication styles, listening, like through school or through your experience? Like what are ways that you can develop that through, medical residency?
Oh, good. Well, you will get a lot of that in medical school. Like there are whole classes devoted to doing a patient interview. and how to get a history of present illness, or an HPI, from a patient. It is a skill, but it's something they prepare you for well in medical school. And by the time you become a resident, you're probably pretty good at it, most likely, because you've gotten a lot of practice. And there are specific interviewing types, and trainings out there. Like one of the big ones is motivational interviewing. How do we inspire patients to undergo behavioral change? And that's a special type of training. But as far as like getting a history of present illness and interviewing a patient on what exactly is wrong, you get a lot of that in medical school.
So they don't just throw you in; they help prepare you to be able to have tough conversations or have good build rapport with people and things like
Yeah.
that.
And
That's
the
really
big thing, like when I went into medical school, it was like I was going into a black box. I had no idea how it worked. I have no family members that are in healthcare. I didn't know anybody personally that was a physician, so I had no one to really ask. But what I'll say is that, like when you get into medical school, and it's doable. You get everybody here can do it, if you just set your mind to it and just focus on it. Um, but once you get in, you are in the program, and you just need to kind of trust the process. They will guide you through and give you the skills you need to take the next step as through medical school, and then become a resident. And then in residency, they'll give you the skills to become an independent practitioner. But you just kind of got to trust the process. You got to do the work, and you will make it through.
Absolutely. I think that's really, really key advice. And something that I'm wondering too, what was it, like through all of your experiences, through education, through now, what's been the best piece of career advice that you've ever received?
For me, I'd say that I think do what you're supposed to do and a little bit more. Always try to find a way to kind of go that extra mile. And if you do that, it'll shine through in some way, shape, or form on your resume, and it'll give you that extra, step up on the people that you might be competing against when you apply to medical school. And it will help you get those like meaningful experiences when it comes to talking about your extracurriculars, your hobbies, your work experience, your volunteerism. So I'd say, kind of show up, do what you're supposed to do, and see if you can, there's a little bit more that you can do. And if so, that'll shine through, and it'll pay dividends down the road as you continue to grow.
Absolutely. I think that's excellent advice. I think that transfers to like all types of career paths. So I think that's really helpful for anybody as well. And I think we kind of covered all the questions
Yeah.
I had. So I think we can, and we've been shifting into questions from the students pretty well as well. But students, feel free to submit any other questions you might have into the chat, and Dr. Smith will answer those for you now. And while we're waiting for those to come through, we did have some pre-submitted questions from students
Yeah.
that I wanted to put out there as well. But one of the student is wondering, through the medical school experience, did you ever have any doubts? You mentioned the process. Did you ever have any doubts or anything about making it through?
Excellent question. Excellent. My experience is, so medical school and medical training is uh, mentally, physically, and emotionally challenging at times. Okay. Also very rewarding, but it takes its toll. And at various times, what I learned in medical school is that people they tended to suffer in silence, if you will. And what I mean by that is you have a lot of very smart people, a lot of type A personalities that don't like to show weakness. But when there were multiple times in the journey that times were tough, and people were kind of reluctant to show up, but we were all in the same boat together. It was, and that's one of the highlights, like one of the best parts of it is, as hard as it gets, you have a cohort of people that you're with and you get through it together. So I'd say that the patients are a fantastic part of being a physician, but also your colleagues, whether it's other physicians, nurses, respiratory therapist, radiology techs, like whatever. Like we're all just trying to achieve the same mission, and working with those individuals. Really, it's kind of like this shared experience, and it's very meaningful as you go through it together. But yes, to answer your question, there are plenty of times where you have like self-doubt. You're like, what did I get myself into? Those type of things. But if you know yourself and you've got to like made the decision, if you know yourself early on before you even apply to medical school, I encourage a significant amount of introspection. Ask yourself, like, is this right for me? Because it's not right for everybody, but ask yourself, is it right for me? If so, if ask yourself why, and if it does seem like the right decision, then go for it. And when you have those moments of doubt, you can always reflect back on like, hey, this is why I'm doing it, and that can help you through those valleys that are inevitable, that are going to happen in the process.
I think that's so helpful. It sounds like leaning on your cohort, having some self-care, remembering why you got there in the first place can be really helpful with, like you said, like navigating some of those doubts or challenges. And that's a good kind of shift into another question that we had was what drew you to medicine? Like what kind of pulled you into this field and got you interested?
Yeah, a great question. For me, I was always interested in science. That was like the fundamental. Like even back in school, in like a junior high, I was really into science more than like any other topic. I actually like one summer in high school just stumbled upon an old biology textbook, started reading it, and was like kind of enamored with the biological sciences. And so medical school was always like in the background. But again, when I was in high school, I had no idea like how to become a physician. Did not know the process, never even heard of the MCAT or anything, didn't even know who to ask about that. So it was kind of, to me, it was maybe a step too far. Like I wasn't sure I could do it. But then as I kind of, got, I kind of more understood like how to get an undergraduate degree. So I kind of went through my journey to get that and learned like what it took to become a physician. And along the way, I kind of just explored my passions. The whole reason I went to that master's degree was, to kind of learn about our healthcare delivery system and like why are there some people that are underinsured or uninsured that are falling through the cracks. These people that I saw in my volunteer opportunities, like when I personally did a lot of volunteer work at homeless shelters. And I'll make another plug for one of the more meaningful volunteer opportunities I had was as a court appointed special advocate, a CASA volunteer. But during all those all those experiences, I just saw people falling through the cracks in our healthcare system, and I wanted to be like part of the solution. And for me, I saw primary care in particular as a part of the solution, and is one of the reasons I chose family medicine.
Thank you. I think it's helpful too to know that your journey wasn't you didn't know your journey at 18 was going to lead to where it led. And I think it's helpful too to talk through, there were different experiences that led you to this path. Like you said, it was always kind of in the back of your mind. And
Yeah.
then doing volunteer work, doing research, knowing your interests, really help kind of guide you to where you are today. So I think that's really helpful and helpful to hear as a student too, to know that you don't necessarily have to have everything figured out in this moment as well. So I think that's so helpful. So I think being open-minded and being open to volunteer opportunities and different things too to help students find what their passion is too, I think is so incredibly helpful. Let's see.
Do you mind if I I have like just another thing I want to mention.
Yeah,
I made a list here of like the practical things I want to make sure that I mention.
absolutely.
Is like, so first of all, and some of these are going to be redundant. I've already talked about them, but there's some I want to make sure I mention. Is one, make sure you get all your prerequisite courses done, and make sure you know like what the prerequisite courses are for medical school admission. Seek mentorship. That's another big one. Make as good a grades as you possibly can. Start preparing for the MCAT. Starting in your junior year early is probably a great time to take the first one, the first MCAT, if you're interested. And that gives you time before you have to start the application progress to retake it if need be. And one thing I want to say is that just like any standardized test, like I have no love for standardized tests. But like any standardized test, you want to know the test. And I invested in a MCAT preparation course, which was expensive, but it helps teach you the test. So you can learn, you can buy a book, go through it, remembering you only get out what you put in, but taking a course, allows you to talk with an expert on the test to kind of learn like what they're going to ask you. And that's invaluable, and that can help you be a little bit more efficient with your studying. Another thing is when it comes time, like for you to submit your application, like you're building your application, you're working with a mentor to review your application. When it comes time to deciding like where you're going to apply to as far as medical schools, you're going to look at your GPA and your MCAT and your application as a whole. The thing that I encourage you to look into, for me, when I applied, it was a book, but I think it's available online now for the prescription through the American Medical Association, is the MSAR. It's the Medical School Admissions Requirements. And they have every medical school in the United States listed, and it has for the class they approved or they got accepted, they have their average MCAT score, their average GPA, and a whole host of other information. Another thing that's very important is does the medical school accept out-of-state applicants? There are like where I'm from, the University of Oklahoma, the State Board of Regents mandates that they accept 75% of their class from within the state of Oklahoma at a minimum. So if you're an out-of-state applicant, you have a much higher hurdle to clear to be accepted. In Ohio, you guys are in good shape here, being in-state in Ohio. I think there are at least 6 allopathic medical schools, which are MD. Like if you graduate, you'll get the MD credential. And there's a couple, I believe, osteopathic medical schools. If you graduate from those programs, you get a DO credential. Those credentials are pretty much the same thing. There are some minor differences, but there are plenty of schools in Ohio, and I encourage you to look into that medical school admission requirement, that MSAR document.
That is super, super helpful. And one question did come through about the MCAT specifically. Do students who want to go to medical school have to take the MCAT and the Casper test as well, or is it just one or the other? I haven't heard of Casper.
Yeah, I don't know the Casper one, but I'm fairly certain that the MCAT is pretty much a requirement for almost every medical school. I mean, I'll hesitate to say all of them because I'm not 100% sure, but taking the MCAT will get your foot in the door in most of them, if not all of them. So the MCAT is the standard. I don't know much about the Casper test, but I would prepare to take the MCAT because most of the schools will recognize your score on that, and that'll give you more opportunities.
Perfect. Thank you. I was like, I hadn't heard of Casper either, so that's a new one to me too. So maybe like one more question, and this one had come through previously, but it was, what was your first day like, kind of as an intern? When you're fresh out of school, you actually are meeting with patients. What was your first day kind of like?
Man, it was kind of surreal. And you have a lot during your journey, like when you get admitted into medical school, um, you have a lot of days, a lot of first days like that where you are like, I am out of my league. But you just got to keep showing up every day and trust the process. Like the first day of medical school, that was kind of surreal. Like the amount of material they plopped down on our desk. I mean, there was like a 3-inch, 3-ring binder full of like material that we were going to cover the first month of medical school, and we were going to have an exam on it at the end of the month. So you're just like, wow, like this is very different from undergrad. So there was that. And then like when you finish your first 2 years of medical school, you start your clinical stuff where you start to go into the hospital and into the clinical setting. And you're like, wow, I'm not sure I'm ready for that either. But then you do that. And then when you do your first year of resident or your first day of residency, like the big thing, the big moment there is like you are now prescribing medications. Like that first time where you write a prescription and say, hey, this is a medication I want you to take. Yeah, that can be kind of intense, depending on like what the medication is. But heck, even if it's just Tylenol, you're like, is this okay? Can I should I is this person safe to get Tylenol? You know, so it's kind of surreal. But then you eventually grow through that, and I'm under no illusions that I'm going to feel something similar that first day that I'm a licensed independent practitioner. I'm going to be looking for somebody to talk to about like, my clinical decision. But really the buck will stop with me, and that's going to be a whole new surreal experience. So, all along the way, there are moments where you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I'm ready. I don't know if I'm ready. Um, but you grow into it. And I think it's just important to realize that. Trust the process, and they're always going to take you a little bit out of your comfort zone, but at the end of the day, that's necessary for growth.
Absolutely. I think that's a good note to end on, and such helpful advice. And this has been I've personally learned a lot, and I know the students have probably learned so much as well. And I just wanted to thank you again for your time today and all of your insights, and for just being so positive and sharing your experiences with career services and with our students today. So thank you again, Dr. Smith, and for everything that you've contributed today. For the students that are watching, for the rest of the week, we do have other healthcare professionals coming on as well. Same time, same place. I think tomorrow we have, let me look really quick. Should have had this pulled up, but we have Casey Ballard, who is a CRNA, meeting with us at 12 to 12:45. And then we're also going to have Jordan Vaughn, who is a surge tech, from 12:45 to 1:30 as well. So we can learn about different opportunities too. But yeah, again, thank you so much. Keep checking out the different professionals this week. And again, Dr. Smith, thank you so much for your time today, and we'll let you get back to helping others and saving lives.
All right, my pleasure. You have a great day.
Thanks, you too.